Hi, my name is Juliet, and I'm the creator and host of Connecting the Dots podcast. I love ideas and problem solving, and my career in communications has led me down a path of curiosity: why we do what we do, how to tell better stories, and how African scientists solve everyday problems. Join me on this enlightening and entertaining exploration of African science like you've never experienced before. Get ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired. Today, we're diving into the world of livestock, agriculture, and the future of food in Africa with two incredible guests with me today. We'll get into everything from the controversy around livestock vaccination to climate change and smallholder farming. Plus, we'll clear the air on that viral debate about methane emissions from cows and lab grown meat. Our guests are two distinguished leaders in the field of veterinary medicine, livestock development, and agricultural sustainability, both hailing from Sudan. I think this is the first time we've had a pair, both from Sudan. They bring a wealth of expertise and experience in advancing animal health and food security across Africa and beyond. Dr. Huyam Salih is the director of the African Union Inter-African Bureau for Animal Resources, AU-IBAR. She holds a PhD in preventive medicine and veterinary public health and a master's in tropical animal health. With over 2 decades of experience, she has led groundbreaking initiatives in livestock development, disease prevention, and animal health interventions, consistently championing sustainable agriculture practices and innovative solutions to improve animal health systems. Dr. Obai Khalifa is a global leader in agricultural development, food systems, and market-driven solutions for rural economies. His career spans veterinary medicine, private sector agribusiness, and large-scale agricultural transformation. Currently, Obai serves as Deputy Director for Agricultural Development in Africa at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he leads efforts to enhance food security, resilience, and market access for small-scale producers. Welcome, Dr. Salih and Khalifa.
Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you.
We always love to start this podcast by personalizing our guests. So I will start with maybe a question to your childhood and growing up. Do you have any hidden talent or skills? And some of our guests have turned out to be poets and belly dancers as well, which is very interesting for scientists. As you tell me about your hidden talent, maybe you can always also tell us what were your childhood names or nicknames, and is there a story behind it? Obai, maybe we can begin with you.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you, Juliet, and amazing introduction. I almost didn't recognize myself. But about myself, my background. So I am from Sudan. I grew up in Khartoum, but I'm originally from the western part of Sudan, from a city called the Obai, which is in the region of Kordofan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pastoral region. So although I didn't grow up there, but we were frequently there during holidays. And that created for me the connection also with livestock, because it's pastoral, as I said, but also my aunts were actually involved in dairy production. They were very resilient dairy producers, smallholder farmers, and they were also very resilient traders. And that really taught me a lot. And, kind of created for me the link with livestock and taught me that, I saw my aunt, I saw that through livestock, they have been able not just to really create, kind of opportunities for themselves, but also to create opportunities to educate their kids. And then fast forward, I also got the exposure to veterinary medicine through my sister, who actually studied veterinary medicine as well. And that really taught me that veterinary medicine is more than just a science, that it is about livelihoods, about nutrition, about, kind of creating also opportunities from a scientific research point of view to link the veterinary medicine with the human medicine, because although she did a PhD in poultry nutrition, she is now specializing in clinical nutrition for humans.
Interesting.
So that was, where I grew up, and that what kind of inspired me also to do the same, to follow her footsteps. In terms of hidden talents, so I think for me, if I was not a veterinarian or doing what I'm doing now, I would have actually become a photographer.
Oh.
I really like photography, and I think it's a way of life. Actually, it's more than just creating something from an artistic point of view. It teaches you patience. It teaches you how to know the rules, because to be a photographer you have to understand the exposure times, the aperture, the sensitivity of the film, and all of that. But you need, as Pablo Picasso said, you need to understand the rules like a pro to be able to break them like an artist. So all of that, kind of, enabled me to be not a very bad photographer, but at the same time also to take things from photography and apply it in everything I'm doing. So let me stop there.
Oh, interesting. And I've seen some photos on your LinkedIn profile. So I'm hoping sometimes you bring that talent or that hobby to the front. Dr. Salih.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope I will be having the same talent as Obai, but I'm not. So for my childhood, I was also born and raised up in Khartoum and in a neighborhood called Durman. But my grandfather's big house is in Kassala. It's a big city in Eastern Sudan. And it's not more about livestock. It's about cropping, actually. We used to have a small farm belonged to my grandfather. So we used to go there only on the holidays of the school time. And it was amazing. We have some small animals, like 1-2 cows inside the farm. But we were more attached to the fruit trees. So at that time, I wasn't thinking about veterinary or studying. When you are so good traditionally in Sudan in biology, they will think you will become a physician.
Like
and this was like stick to me since my childhood. And then I was a bit rebellious in the high secondary school, and I wasn't doing what I have to do at that time to get the score to get me to the medical faculty, to the medicine faculty. And I was thinking, what options I have? And I was taking after my mom in lots of things, and she's more on the environmental side. I was taking an environmental study as an extra in my exam. And then I realized I can do more than just being a physician.
Right.
Because I was planning not to repeat the year, to sit to the exam twice. So I want to go from the first year to the university. Then I realized I can go to zoology, for instance. And then when I'm thinking about zoology, because I got a book for the Society of Environmentalists in Sudan, it was led by somebody graduated from zoology. I saw the bio behind the book, and okay, why should I be a physician? I can be studying zoology, and then I can go to veterinary medicine. And this was the beginning of the third year, just before the exam to the university. And I decided, okay, I'm so happy I have options. And I decided, okay, veterinary will be the first option. The second option will be going to study zoology. And this is the first time I realized I would be going to veterinary medicine. But all my life, I have a pet animal, which is a cat.
Yeah.
And I'm so attached to live objects more than dealing with pharmacy or other subject. So, and I enjoyed to the maximum studying veterinary medicine. I wasn't, as I mentioned, I wasn't so serious during the university time.
Yeah.
But when I came to the master degree...
Can I challenge that, actually? Can I challenge that?
Yeah, go for it.
You can't challenge
that.
Okay,
because we went to school together. But
same
anyway, I'll
you're
keep
not
quiet. I'll keep
me.
quiet.
You're not remembering me in the university, so...
Different person. Many decades later. Yeah.
Yeah. People usually get confused between a quiet, calm person and a serious person.
Yeah.
I was calm and quiet, but that doesn't mean I'm serious. But I'm quite serious in some aspects. Regarding the hidden talents, when I was a child, I used to paint a lot, and I thought this might take me to the some artistic studies or something like that.
Yeah.
And because I was so ambitious also on the academic sector, I was thinking, okay, I might do the same. And then I realized I cannot do the same, the both of them at the same time. So I stopped painting since long time. During the COVID, I discovered one talent. I cannot call it a talent, but something that I love to do, which is writing small articles, what I'm feeling.
Oh,
Actually, it
beautiful.
started just after the graduation.
Yeah.
I felt I was very enthusiastic to get out of the university to do something. And it was challenging to find a job right after the graduation. And I was putting all my complaining to those diaries. And during the COVID time, I was in Rome alone, and I have lots of time just to put things about politics in Sudan, about veterinary studies, about social aspects in my life. And I enjoyed it to the maximum. And I found some reactions from the public in the Facebook.
Yeah.
So I found, okay, this is something that I enjoy. I will do it in my leisure time. I love dancing, not what you have mentioned, but the Zumba dancing.
Yeah.
I was a member. Let me say a regular member to the Zumba classes in Sudan.
Yeah.
Because it helps you shape the body in terms of exercises.
Yeah.
But it's also taking away all the negative energy. So I'm coming from a family, we are so funny and we enjoy the dance and singing. I sing to myself only because my family said I'm not good with the tunes, so I kept to myself. Yeah.
So we shouldn't expect to find you on America's Got Talent
No.
and the singing show.
That's okay. Up
Yeah.
to here. Singing to myself.
You're happy at that. Okay. Thank you, Huyam and Obai. Just moving you into the livestock conversation. And with your background both at the University of Khartoum and then traveling the world, Obai, we were busy researching and also talking just before we said the recording about your move from Khartoum all the way to Netherlands and then Paris and then the US and back here in Kenya. And the same with you, Huyam, from Khartoum to Rome, and then now Nairobi based at AU IBA. Recently, I think it was earlier this year, farmers and the public were convinced the Western institutions were funding a vaccination drive that would genetically modify our cows. So first, Huyam, this is your ballpark. Could you give our listeners some clarity on the vaccination drive? What exactly is it? Why is it important? And then shed light on the issue of methane emissions from livestock from a global to a continental point of view, especially because for us on our research, we discovered that a lot of methane emission is coming from oil and gas and not livestock. So it's interesting to see the angle that the media has decided to take with that particular discussion.
Okay, so let me start from the methane issue, coming back to the vaccination. In general, in total, in Africa, the emission of the greenhouse gases, it's just a fraction comparing to what's happening in the other part of the world.
Right.
So it's assumed that in many studies, Africa is contributing to by like 3 to 4% maximum, the whole continent for all sectors. So imagine the contribution of the livestock to this will be
minimal. Right.
So I think there might be scenarios for the other part of the globes. They want to cut their livestock production, but I don't think this is the way to go in Africa. And this is not just a personal view. It's something that coming from studies and scientific reviews for different analysis. And there is the needs of the African people. We are behind in terms of nutrition security. And we all believe that animal products are the one responsible for satisfying the needs for our kids to avoid malnutrition.
Yeah.
So we are obliged to increase our production from livestock, but we should do it in a sustainable way that adapting to our animal resources, our natural resources, but at the same time, we should do it in a sustainable way to cope with what is happening, to avoid what's happening in other parts of the world. But at the same time, we should think about the model of raising animal in Africa. It's not the same. Much production coming from pastoralists, and I'm a believer that pastoral system has contributed to environmental conservation.
Oh, wow.
In a way.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Pastoral systems in Africa, in majority of them, are transhumans. So they are good practitioners to avoid like consuming even the grazing lands for longer period.
Yeah.
So they are here today, tomorrow they are in another place.
Yeah.
And they know where to go during the dry season, where to go during the rainy season. And they make this balance. And they're contributing to fertilizing the soils. They're contributing to many other activities within cropping and agriculture as well. So for me, this scenario for cutting the livestock production is not applied to Africa, but we need to think about how to make our production system more resilient, more sustainable. And actually, we are in the other part of adapting to the climate change because we are contributing less to the problem, but we are receiving the burden.
Yeah.
Flooding, dry season, droughts, and this affecting our production system, affecting our food security. And we need to bring the best scenario to Africa for producing good livestock and sustainable manner. Coming to the vaccination, livestock production composed of different services. Animal health services is one of it, but we have the breeding services, we have other extension services and others, the food sector as well, the feed for the animals. The vaccination against the animal problems and the transboundary animal diseases was practiced since long time in Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm really shocked that those misinformations are coming into Kenya, the host country for the AU IBAR.
Yeah.
Because this office was established in 1951 mainly to eradicate the rinderpest.
Okay.
And the main tool was followed to eradicate rinderpest was vaccination. So the vaccination started here.
Yeah. Over 70 years ago.
Over 74 years ago.
Yeah.
From Kenya to
the rest of the world.
To all the continent countries.
Yeah.
And just to mention that, Africa succeeds through the leadership of IBAR with other partners to eradicate the rinderpest from the continent. And the disease was eradicated from the whole globe by 2011.
Okay.
And this is the second disease in human and animal medicine to be eradicated. And now we are embarking on a journey to eradicate the second animal disease, which is pest dubitis ruminans or PPR. And we have already launched the project this year to start for Africa. And it's also led by AU IBAR. And for that, we need to engage the farmers, the pastoralists. They should believe that vaccination is a key to eradicate not only PPR, but also to control the other small ruminant diseases and other animal diseases.
Yeah.
And currently, we are practicing in a way in many of the African Union member states the vaccination as a remedy for a disease. We should use it in a preventive way before the disease before the outbreak come to the country. We should do the prevention to those diseases. And for that, I think vaccination is so important. And I want just to mention all the vaccines used in Africa are tested by the AU PANVAC, which is the African Union Pan-African Center for Vaccination, to assure the quality of the vaccines. So everything said about how those vaccines will affect other aspects within the animals and to stop the methane is just let me say, fake news.
Yeah. fake truths.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and Obai, I want to come to you with the whole vaccine misconceptions, and let's call them myths also in the media. You know, you hear myths and misconceptions and suddenly you think it's something coming from the rural areas. But this is very interesting because this is coming from mainstream media. And for me and also for the team at Connecting the Dots, it was very interesting that, you know, we hear about anti-vaxxers when it comes to COVID vaccine, and suddenly you begin to see the same theory but in animal health. So what's your take on this conversation, Obai, from where you sit?
Yeah. No, maybe not so much to add on top of what Huyam has already explained.
Yeah.
Just to say that in addition to the livelihoods components also and the impact of vaccination in terms of the economic impact and the impact on farmers and all of that, I think it's important also to realize that there is the connection between livestock health and human health. So number one, most of the infectious diseases, more than 70% of the infectious diseases which are infecting humans, has an origin in livestock, in animals.
Yeah.
So
70% is high.
More than 70%.
Yeah.
And the only way actually to tackle it effectively is to target it at source. So treating animals, there is no question about
treating
it,
humans
right? You
also,
have
yeah.
to treat it at source rather than waiting until it becomes a problem in humans. The other thing is, I think nowadays maybe the antimicrobial resistance is one of the most challenging issues we are dealing with, both in veterinary medicine and human medicine. The fact that there are very few antimicrobials now available effectively to treat highly infectious bacterial diseases makes it our responsibility to be very responsible in how we are using antimicrobials in veterinary medicine, because the irresponsible use of antimicrobials, antibacterials in veterinary medicine puts a lot of pressure and then select the genes which transmit resistance for the bacteria. And it can be transmitted through the environment or through the food chain and all of that to humans, which creates this kind of antimicrobial resistance, and these antibiotics become not really helpful.
Yeah.
And then people die and animals die as well.
Right.
So in order to do that, you need to focus on the prevention rather than the treatment through vaccination. Even if it is a viral disease, for example, foot and mouth disease. So by treating all of those, through bacterial vaccines and viral vaccines, then you are actually reducing the pressure on the bacteria, and as such, creating more opportunities for using the antimicrobials when they are desperately needed, especially by humans. The other thing, to add more on the economic component, the cost of diseases in livestock in Africa is more than $9 billion annually.
On the continent.
On the continent.
Yeah.
One disease, foot and mouth disease, the impact of the disease in Africa is more than $2 billion or $2.3 billion annually. It's not just because of the impact, which is obviously the primary thing that we care about, the impact on the farmers in terms of reduced productivity and drop in milk production and all of that. It's actually the trade implications of the disease on economies. We know that livestock exports is key for countries, especially in East Africa, right? So by kind of opening your door and by accepting not to be part of the global efforts to really control those diseases, you are basically isolating yourself from the opportunity to reach those lucrative markets. So let me get back to your question. So the thing is, I think it's quite legitimate from the farmers to question where those vaccines are coming from, whether those vaccines are good or not. And it is our responsibility as stakeholders, whether we are veterinarians or whether we are regulators or whether we are government, to make sure that we have a transparent system whereby the farmers can actually trust our regulatory processes. We do have very robust regulatory and registration processes and guidelines for all veterinary medicines and vaccines in Africa, including Kenya.
Yeah.
So those processes are part of the globally agreed upon guidelines for registration in terms of making sure from safety point of view, from efficacy point of view, from quality point of view, what you are stating on the label of the vaccine is actually what's inside in terms of where this vaccine is coming from, what are the claims, what does it work against, what are the side effects, and all of that. And not only that, even there is a system, what we call the pharmacovigilance, right? To be able for any person using the vaccine or knows about anything untoward effects that happened because of the use of the vaccine to report it in the system.
Yeah.
So I think creating this kind of transparency in terms of how those processes for bringing vaccines and testing them work in our countries is key. And then, in addition to that, it is also our responsibility to talk about the importance of vaccines using numbers and using simple language to make sure that we are able to tackle all those myths around vaccination and all those misinformation and disinformation. Because the honest truth is, all the people who are actually spreading those kind of information, they are not the ones who are today or directly impacted by whatever happens whenever there is a disease outbreak. They don't know the pain of losing one goat, if it means, paying for a school fee, or if it means paying for a dowry, or if it means, saving, or all of that.
Right.
So being able really to embark on this, all of us, and provide from a scientific point of view, from a data point of view, is a way actually to go forward.
No, and I really like this point, especially, you've touched on a couple of themes there, AMR being one. I always like to connect the dots on the Connecting the Dots podcast, because previously we had a guest who really talked about bacteria and talked about the issue about AMR and that becoming a big crisis. And, you contextualizing it and also taking it into livestock or animal health and the impact of disuse or poor use of antibiotics being a problem is a huge one. The foot and mouth is also another one. Disease, FMD disease. And I know there are countries like Australia, for example, that for them, foot and mouth is not a big problem. So they're very vigilant with who's coming into their borders because of the impact to their food productivity. So it's a shame to hear that, for us, we want to almost tone down the impact of diseases by creating anti-vaccination campaigns and drives for something that could benefit us if you think about monetary returns, and again, on the FMD, looking at just the outbreaks, Kenya alone has been having for the last couple of years, 2018, 2020, the impact on billions of Kenya shillings lost.
Yeah.
If you look at those numbers, it's shocking that we are just losing money where we have available interventions. Huyam, the Kenya Veterinary Association says controlling methane emissions. So I'm bringing you back to the methane emissions because it's been in the media. In our livestock production systems isn't a priority since most of our livestock is raised organically. Do you agree? And how should we approach the whole issue of livestock and climate? And Obai, please feel free to also step in.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree with the point that controlling the methane from the African or the Kenyan livestock is not the same way that described at the global forum. But I think we need also, as I said, we are impacted by the climate change. And the countries should know how they can advocate for the need for climate finance to support the livestock as well. And looking at the livestock from the other angle as a solution for the problem and not a problem itself. There's many studies and many projects aiming to support the capacities within the African countries to make sure that they are understanding the problem of how climate change is affecting the livestock production, and also how to represent Africa and having a common position for the continent when we are participating in the global meetings concerning the climate change. And I think this is one of the important things that to do. Africa shouldn't remain as passive, so others to tell Africa what to do.
Yeah, the African voice is missing.
We need to take the initiative and to start putting the roadmap for ourselves and make sure that we know how we want to go for transforming our livestock production in a sustainable and resilient way that will satisfy the needs that we have in Africa, but at the same time, saving the resources for the upcoming generations. This is so important. And there is lots of advocacy campaigns needs to be practiced in Africa to reach this point of awareness for the producers and the also decision makers.
Yeah. The advocacy should target who? The communities themselves or even our government? We also saw how the government handled the whole vaccination. Do you feel there's a way in which the messaging should be done and done properly?
Yeah, maybe I can jump in. I think it's basically, just to add maybe on what Huyam has already said, I think what's important inside our continent, but also outside our continent, because most of the pressure on us from livestock point of view is also coming from outside. And the challenge is even the question when they pose a question of like, do we do livestock or not livestock because of the climate? And to us, it's not this kind of binary decision. It's not about livestock or no livestock. There is no question that livestock is really an integral part of our lives and our economy, and from, nutrition, from women empowerment point of view, from economic value point of view, and also that, especially for pastoralists, as Huyam said, this is actually their lives and livelihoods, and it's part of, kind of their social fabric as well.
Yeah.
So the question should be, how can we do it differently? Number one. Number two, it's also about the consumption of livestock or the animal source protein. When you are talking about other countries, you are talking about countries which are already, maybe the average Dutch person is consuming more than 300 liters of milk per year.
300 liters?
In average, maybe, picking some African countries, people are consuming less than 8 liters per year. What a Dutch person can be maybe consuming per week.
In a week, yeah.
In a week.
Oh my goodness.
So the fact is, this is a very low base for us in terms of really making a difference for a child between being stunted or having any growth challenges, or for pregnant women and all of that, and between thriving in their lives. So I think being able to address those kind of nuances and differences between different countries is key. The other thing is, when you are also just following the same example, if you are taking an average cow globally producing about 25, 30 liters per day, and an average cow in Africa producing 2-3 liters per day, the question becomes not how do we reduce the methane emissions by cutting, the number of cows we have in Africa, but how can we do more with less? If we are able to get the same amount of milk
production,
instead of having 20 cows producing this same amount, having one cow producing it, then we are saving in terms of the emission intensity. Emission intensity is basically how much methane is coming because of your glass of milk or your kilogram of meat. So, and the levers are also very clear. We know that it's about animal health, vaccination. It's about animal production, proper feeding. It's about improved genetics. It's about improved husbandry and all of that.
Yeah.
So by being able to position ourselves globally, that we can actually do a lot better. We are starting from a very low base in terms of productivity in Africa. Then we would be able to make our case and get the support that we need to continue, and investments that need to continue flowing into Africa, into the livestock sector. So I think that's part of it. To your question about, advocacy to whom, I think it's advocacy to make sure that the nuance of where the livestock sector is in Africa is clearly explained and clearly understood.
Yeah. Obai, I want to move you to food production, especially from smallholder farmers away from livestock. But just quickly on those points about animal husbandry to increase, for example, milk production or meat production, what would you say to a farmer who is saying no to interventions that they perceive to be lab-based? And they're saying those are lab-based technologies and I don't want them on my farm. And, we were giggling to ourselves because there's a phrase that has been used is my cow, my choice, especially for the anti-vaxxers out there.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to be clearer in terms of providing the support that is needed and the advisory services also to the farmers that are needed. So part of the investments from public sector, from private sector, should really focus on making sure that we are able to demonstrate to the farmers the value of vaccination and the value of proper feeding and the value of proper husbandry practices and all of that. But believe it or not, Juliet, farmers, they know this better than anybody. So that's why, again, I'm saying, most of the people who are actually saying this, if they have themselves, if they are what we call the weekend farmers, if they have cattle somewhere else and they are sitting in the city and talking about, farmers should not vaccinate, they would be vaccinating themselves, their cattle.
Yeah.
But they would be still, spreading those things. So building on the knowledge that is already available to the pastoral communities and to the farmers and making sure that it is not just coming from the public sector kind of advisory machinery and all of the private sector, kind of efforts also to make sure there is proper training on veterinary medicine and the practices, that we are able also to use community animal health workers, community leaders to make sure that they share experiences with their neighbors. And that's normally the strongest way to convince and they say seeing is believing, right? So being able to really transmit those kind of experiences through the local communities rather than forcing things from outside is actually a way to look at it.
Yeah. Obai, on to smallholder farmers, those farmers that we're talking about. It is the same farmer who we're talking about their cow. So now talking about their land. China's agricultural transformation has been driven by smallholder farmers. They make up about 90% of the workforce and cultivate most of the land. You yourself have seen firsthand this happening in China and how they've been able to drive that. But what is the key to modernizing agriculture, not only in Kenya, but on the continent, at the same time as keeping smallholder farmers at the center?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. I can talk about it for a long time, but I think basically, and first of all, it's not just China. I think it's across the global south.
Yeah.
We do have many learning opportunities that we can actually draw upon.
Which countries would we consider in the global south?
Let me talk about China and then I will give other examples.
Okay.
So China, we started very recently from a very low base in terms of driving agricultural productivity. So 1960s, 1970s, China was having the same kind of output from agricultural development like us. Today, China is producing more than 2.7 times more agricultural output than the whole of Africa. Take rice, for example. China, I think, started maybe with less than 2 tons per hectare. Today is producing more than 6 tons per hectare, while Africa is growing very, very slowly in terms of improved productivity in average or yield for rice. In terms of rural poverty and livelihoods, 1978, China had more than 800 million people in poverty.
Yeah.
Today, not today actually, to 2011, this number has been dropped by 87%.
That's crazy.
So it's an amazing journey. And if you look at it, I think the conclusion is that there is no silver bullet. It's commitment and dedication from all the key stakeholders, but primarily the doubling down on agriculture and rural infrastructure. So the rural infrastructure investments have been massive in China. So that has been key. Number two, investments in innovations.
Mhm.
So CAS, China Academy for Agricultural Science, has been also key in driving the scientific research, in improving, bringing new varieties of seeds and all of that. But most importantly, also from policy, from markets development point of view, to your point, really about putting, the small scale farmers and households in the center of the strategy
Right.
was key also in all of that. And then, looking at agriculture as a powerhouse for the economy, not just a livelihood of people or subsistence farmers, kind of fantasizing about subsistence farming. No, even looking at the opportunity to drive the economic growth by developing agriculture and then freeing also labor. As the productivity increases, then the labor would continue to go and join other sectors from manufacturing point of view, from services and all of that. So this has been key for China. Back to other examples, so even closer to the livestock story, Uruguay, small, tiny country, South America, less than 3 million people, maybe, or 3.5 million people.
Sounds
I
like
don't
the
remember.
population of Nairobi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they are feeding, believe it or not, through their export of meat, 10 times more population of their own country.
Oh,
And they are generating an income from meat export that is, I don't remember the number, I think maybe $2-3 billion of income coming from just meat export.
Yeah.
While they have only 12 million cattle. And in Kenya, I think we have 20 million or something like that. I don't remember the number.
Oh my goodness.
But the thing is, again, it doesn't happen by coincidence.
Yeah.
It happens through commitment towards developing the infrastructure, very robust identification traceability systems, really from farm to fork, tracing, tracking animals, tracking meat cuts, and creating this kind of confidence in their products, but also not just doing more, but doing better by making sure that, to the earlier point made by Huyam about pastoralists, it's about rotational grazing, it's about precision farming, it's about all those kind of sustainable practice, and making sure that through intensive or sustainable intensification, that you can actually continue preserving the resources and the most precious resource they have, which is their land. So there are lots of opportunities also to really learn from experiences of countries like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Uruguay example is a really good one because it reminds me of something. I think, Obai, it was from a member of your team that I had read on a trip report. And if you think about China and its population, and also what Africa could benefit by growing different plants, or farm produce and then exporting them. So it's that's a really solid example. Huyam? And then also, Obai, when you think about the work that you do, what's the one big problem that you are trying to solve? And if you had to pick your top 3 solutions, what would they be?
Mm-hmm. Can I start?
Yes.
So there's many problems, but let me prioritize. I think Obai has already mentioned some of the issues through his previous answer. And I think in the work I'm doing, the most issue that I would like to solve is to generate the data for the people who are using it to lead the transformation, because we are supporting the continent, but the real implementers are the producers.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that through the public sector, but also through the private sector, we are availing the services needed by those producers. And I think one of the biggest challenges in the livestock production in Africa, the weak involvement of the private sector in the sector.
Okay.
We need more investors from the private sector to work in providing the services and also practicing the production itself, to pull the smallholders to formal value chains that will be resilient, that will be sustainable in terms of production and marketing and everything.
Yeah.
The second problem, I don't think the livestock sector will be able to solve alone, which is the weak infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
and the disconnectivity between the different parts, especially in the rural area.
Right.
There's many articles speaking about the average volume or length of the rural roads network, comparing Africa to the others. It's really we are far behind.
Yeah.
So I think those are the investments that we need the public sector to invest more to connect the continent together, the rural areas, which are the production sites. In one of the projects that we were working in Sudan, we discovered that we are having accessibility to those production sites only 6 months per year. The other 6 months, it's closed area because of the rainy season, and there is no good infrastructure. So even if you bring the private sector to deal and collaborate with the smallholders, it's still very difficult for them to sustain their production.
Yeah.
And this can be solved by expanding the dialogue on the livestock issues to non-livestock sector people, ministries of finance, financial institutions, ministers of infrastructure. They should be included within the discussion on how to transform the livestock sector in Africa. And I think for the information challenge, we might be able to contribute by creating the platforms. For bringing more private sector, I think we need to think more about building the capacities within our continent on how to execute public-private partnerships, where the public sector will do the policy and the governance and the regulations, while the private sector will be delivering the services. And it will be like a business-oriented production for the livestock.
Yeah. No, I'm very happy that you have approached it with a business hat on.
Yeah.
Our second last guest recently, Justice Ogando, was actually talking about this point that maybe as researchers, we need, or even when you engage in the private sector, we need to think about agriculture or health as a business.
That's right.
To be able to maximize. Obai, you've talked about from farm to fork. And I know there's a lot of wastage if you look at our infrastructure, because it makes no sense why whenever we have rainy seasons, everything grinds to a halt.
Yeah.
When the rest of the world, is traveling, Japan, for example, with their high-speed train, they travel kilometers, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, whether it's sun. Whereas here, it's different. So it's an interesting perspective, and I love the inclusion of the private sector. Maybe coming up with solutions for that. Obai?
Yeah, I wanted to tease actually. I'm first to say I haven't heard anything about PPR in the solutions, but anyway, he mentioned about it already earlier.
It's included, Obai. Just let me say that when I'm speaking about privatization, even of the services for the animal health, that means we are targeting private sector to participate in the PPR eradication, because we will be receiving, and we are receiving grants from donors and partners, but the PPR eradication will be implemented and achieved over many years. And that needs commitment not only from the partners, from the member states, the countries themselves, and the private sector should be there to make sure that the services will be sustainable. It's not just stop here by giving the first vaccination and we stopped. We need to do the preventive vaccination. And we need more innovative models for keeping this cycle running.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's, the primary challenge, all of us are facing is actually climate change, right?
Right.
And as Huyam said, the people who are actually in the forefront of facing the impact of climate change are farmers. and livestock producers. So I think it's all about being able to put this population who are actually the custodians of our livestock, who are actually responsible for feeding us, in the center of our solutions. And different ways we can, kind of engage and try, each one of us from our, different perspectives, to try to be part of the solution, to increase their resilience and increase their ability to adapt to the impact of climate change. So, for example, for the crops farmers, being able to understand that you need to think about new ways of tackling diseases, tackling droughts, through improved inputs and all of that. Even thinking about our own African crops, we all grew up eating millet and eating sorghum and eating, in West Africa, more fonio and all of that. And we know those crops are very nutritious. They're very rich with nutrients, very rich in fiber. They're very, very resilient with, climate change and all of that. But we don't focus on them in terms of really building the market, creating the demand that is needed from, urban dwellers and all of that, and thinking about also the research that is needed to improve the seed, while all the research is focusing on the big, kind of staple crops like, rice and maize and wheat and all of that. So this is one area, we can think about how to do it differently. And then from livestock point of view, to think about pastoralists, the fact that, it's becoming more difficult, although as Huyam said, they are really occupying the most difficult, the harshest regions of Africa. They are contributing positively to climate change, but they are the most marginalized and mostly even blamed for many of the things that are happening, and part of it is the conflict and all of that. So I think being able to innovate in the business models, how we are making sure from private sector point of view that we are able really to increase the value capture of pastoralists and to make sure that we are working with private sector, with slaughterhouses, with processors and all of that to increase also the value addition and the value of our animals in Africa, and then make sure that this value is really trickling down to all players in the value chain. I think that is something we need to look at. And then if we put this in really the center of our thinking and also think about the need to change the approach from humanitarian approach and thinking about the value chain of pastoralists are just something that is completely useless, need only support through kind of giving aid in perpetuity.
Yeah.
If we don't stop doing that, then there is no point. And then all the innovations, everything can actually be plugged into this kind of thinking.
Yeah. You are bringing us closer to the end of time. But before that, there are some key questions we'd like to ask on the podcast. So very quickly, quick responses, myths and misconceptions. And Obai, I'm sure you anticipated that, having or working for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, now the Gates Foundation, what myths or misconceptions really upset you when you hear them? And as you think about it, you don't have to think far. Let me start with Huyam.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think since we are starting the PPR eradication, this is really upsetting to know that there is misinformation about the value of the vaccination to the farmers and pastoralists, because the main tool that we are using to eradicate PPR is vaccination, and we are thinking of more innovation to do the vaccination, like the thermostable vaccine and the other vaccination delivery services that we are looking for, bringing more private sector to help the public sector in the battle. So bringing those misinformation was really a disappointing, especially for IPAR, who was here in this country for like 74 years.
Huyam, is there anything you've read in the media that makes you want to pull your hair out? And what was it? What was a caption or a headline?
I think this linkages between don't vaccinate your animals because this will be cutting the production or killing our animals, because even the set of the information wasn't. I saw one misinformation in some of the platforms and Twitters, and I think this was really disappointing for me. But the only thing makes me positive and optimistic that I know that how the farmers and the producers themselves, knowing about the value of the vaccines, they are the ones sometimes requesting their animals to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
And I think the traditional farmers of the past, they are not yet here. We have very good, well-connected producers now because we have the media, as it is also spreading those misinformation, but there's real information, good guidance are here in the media as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Obai? myths,
Yeah.
misconceptions?
No, for me, I mean, first of all, I'm here not representing, the organization that I work for. I'm representing myself as an African vet. I'm really disappointed because I think the risk is huge that with this kind of messaging that we are going to lose the gain that we have been building, in the last decades, since after the independence, lots of efforts already explained in terms of, building the vaccination capacity, building markets and thinking about the, from an economic point of view, sustainability and scaling of all those solutions.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is disappointing is that all people who are really engaging actively in those kind of things, they are, number one, not the people who are actually impacted by the whatever the consequences it's going to be.
Yeah.
And secondly, they are not the people who understand actually what's going on from a scientific point of view. Even when they talk about methane emissions, for example, they think that, the cow, produces methane from the back end. And the cow is actually, we all know that it's burping methane, right? So it's just an example that, people who are really on the driving seat in, having the loudest voice and all of that are not the ones who are actually adopting science. But I'm an optimist by nature, and same like Huyam, I think to me, as an African vet, again, I really believe in the wisdom and the resilience of our farmers in Africa as very, kind of smart entrepreneurs, and they know the right decisions to be made. But it's our responsibility really to help them by equipping them with the right information.
Absolutely. And, this is the reason of existence of the podcast, is to be able to give professionals like yourselves a platform to be able to demystify a lot of the information or the fake truths that are out there. There's a Swahili, I think it is a Swahili saying, or it has a Swahili word in it. We were talking about the linkages between Swahili and Arabic. This phrase says, empty debes make the most noise. So again, like you're saying, the people who are making the most noise are not the informed population. It's not even the farmers themselves on the ground. And just lastly, what scares you? What fascinates you? Very quickly about the world today. It doesn't have to be in livestock or in farm productivity.
I would just stick to what really amazes me, which is the youth, the young people.
Okay. And what scares you, Obai?
I would just keep it there.
You want to keep it positive. Huyam?
Okay. What scares me is how fast and far those misinformation are spreading. But what is fascinating me as well is how these media platforms can be used to spread the true information. And I think we can make the best use of it. And coming to the youth mentioned by Obai, I think we need to attract the youth more to the livestock businesses. And I think they will be able to create innovative way to address all the challenges that we have been discussing here.
Well, they always say there's never enough time when you're having fun. So we have sadly come to the end of this particular podcast recording. Doctors Huyam, Salih, and Obai Khalifa, thank you so much for joining us today. Your insights and your expertise have been truly invaluable. And we're very, very grateful for your time that you've taken to share your knowledge with us. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you so much.